Welcome to the Covert Narcissism podcast. I'm your host, Renee Swanson. I am not a therapist, and you are not a victim. Welcome to the Covert Narcissism podcast. I'm your host, Renee Swanson, and I'm super glad to have everybody here today. I have a special guest. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. It's been in the works for a little while, kind of talking things through. It's a very specific topic today. But I first want to start by welcoming Kathy here on the show. Kathy, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, Renee. I'm honored to be here today.
So I've gotten to enjoy getting to know you actually over the last, I don't know how long it's been, maybe about a year, something like that. And I love the conversations we've been having, but we're going to kind of dive in a little bit to the church issue and dealing with covert narcissism when you are coming from a Christian perspective, because that really complicates things. And so, Kathy, thank you for bringing this to the table and being willing to talk about such a difficult topic.
Yeah, thank you. It is a very difficult topic.
It is. So I think we're going to start with topic number one off of this is as you termed it, is a Christian fog. We talk about the fog, the fear, obligation, guilt when you're living with a covert narcissist. But now we're dealing with adding to that fog another layer from a Christian perspective. So why don't you get us started on that?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. Well, when I first learned about FOG, the acronym fear, obligation, and guilt, in one of your early podcasts, I gasped because I realized that's so much of what I had been living with. I had been living in fear of not doing the right thing, obligation to do the right thing, and guilt because I didn't think I was doing the right thing well enough.
Right.
And it resonated so deeply within me. And so in my therapy, I learned so much about how this extends to our Christian beliefs.
It really does.
It really does. Mm-hmm. And it's not that our Christian beliefs are wrong in any way. There's just an unhealthy element of this fog that creeps its way into our belief system. Mm-hmm. And it kind of gets all intertwined in there.
It does. Yeah, it does. And I can relate to that so much. And with my own background, of course, I have a strong church upbringing, very Christian family for generations. You know, my dad's a preacher, and I know you can relate to this. And that fear of, as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult, I remember being very driven by fear, obligation, and guilt. I was terrified that I was going to do the wrong thing and die and go to hell. I was so driven by the fear of making sure I did everything exactly right. That if I had a thought in my head of, I really don't like that person, I'm kind of frustrated with them. Oh no, God's going to judge me because I don't like this person. I have to like this person because that's what Christians do. And so I did have a bit of a warped sense of reality of where my role in life was, very driven by making sure I did everything exactly right. So this perfectionism kind of where I landed. And the obligation as a wife then was that I had to, meet all of his needs and be, submissive and be completely respectful and always honoring. I could never have a bad thought about my husband. That was my Christian duty, is I couldn't think anything bad about my husband. Well, there's this level of humanness. Guess what? We have bad thoughts even about the people we love, and cherish, because that's human nature. I might not like the way, my mom says something. Well, I'm going to have a thought where I go, yeah, man, I really didn't like that. Doesn't make me a bad person. It doesn't mean I don't love my mom. It's just going to happen. And sorry, Mom, if you're out there listening, I didn't mean it that way. It was just an example. But I was so driven by that. Can you relate to that?
Oh, my goodness. Yes. And I think that fear gets so ingrained within us that then we do almost adopt a false reality like you're saying, because we cannot ever afford to be wrong. And so we're afraid we're afraid we'll do something wrong. So even if we do something wrong, then it gets buried way deep within us. Don't want to admit that. So we just keep going on the route that we're on, rather than admitting we were wrong. And that can set us up for getting on some wrong paths, like marrying the wrong person,
right,
or getting into a relationship that isn't healthy because, well, I've already committed to this, and so I have to stay with this. And if I don't stay with this, I'm afraid what will happen.
Right. And I mean, I don't know about you. I was already this walking on eggshells. I didn't know what walking on eggshells was when I first heard the phrase. And what I thought it was definitely was not reality, because I was walking on eggshells and didn't know it. Okay. I was doing that, constantly trying to figure out the right way to say something and the right way to do that. I just thought that was me trying to be a better person. I didn't know it was walking on eggshells. Okay. But I was doing that long before I ever met my husband and getting married. This was what I was doing in my life as a Christian, constantly looking for, okay, I have to make sure I do it this way and that way. I have to make it the right, always on the high alert, looking out for anything in me that wouldn't be godly.
Yeah.
And so this walking on eggshells concept, I didn't know I was doing it. And it was just familiar territory. So when I married and I was still doing it, this was familiar territory.
Sure.
Living in the fear, the obligation, and the guilt, it just kind of followed right into the perfect storm to being married to a covert narcissist.
It totally does. Because if we are walking in fear, walking on eggshells to not make them angry, for example, I know you've talked about the example of the toothpaste on the mouth with your husband. And with mine, the first time that I saw him get angry was when his flight arrived early at the airport. And this was way back before FlightAware, even before cell phones. And so I didn't call the airport to see if it was going to be on time or not. I just assumed it would be on time, and they ended up landing early, and he was so angry with me. And I couldn't understand that. But boy, I would tell you what, I was never late to pick him up again.
Of course
just
not.
like you said, we do everything and to not make them angry. Okay, so from a Christian perspective, I think there's a real misunderstanding of the fear of God and fear of man. And I think, as kids, there's an innocence that we can misunderstand that. And we go, fear of God. I need to be afraid of God. And from a childlike perspective, we see that and we think, oh, he is big and mighty, and I am afraid of him. But as we grow and as we mature, we realize that's more of an awe and a respect.
Right.
But that's not what translates into a marriage with a covert narcissist. We want to respect our spouse, but what if they're not respectable?
Right.
Then we're afraid because we're not respecting them the way we're supposed to.
Right. And so we dig in and try. I have to only have good thoughts. I'm supposed to, what's the scripture talks about,
Philippians 4:8. I have it right here. It's whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy. Think about such things. So
these things. Yes. And so I'm supposed to think on those things. I'm supposed to focus on those things. And so I would focus in on, the good times we had together, the times when he was showing up as a good dad, the times he was showing up as a good spouse, which it was there. But as I've said in my podcast, one good evening would erase 2 months of bad behavior. Yes, we had good moments. We had good times where like there was some genuineness there. There was some realness there. But it became the breadcrumbs. It became these tiny little bits of it. But Scripture says that's what I need to focus on. And I believe I'm doing the right thing by focusing on them. So I'm going to dig in because I'm very motivated to do the right thing. And so that's where I spend all my time and all my energy. And then I can't figure out why I feel so beaten down, why I feel so discouraged, why I feel like, why is my body reacting when he's around? Like I don't have feelings of wanting to be around him, but I'm not willing to let myself even think that way. And so you talk about cognitive dissonance, like it's not even that my thoughts and my feelings don't match. It's that I am forcing myself to think about thoughts that don't match my feelings. Like I am digging in to make the cognitive dissonance happen.
Oh, absolutely. And I totally understand that, Renee. I remember one Thanksgiving, I was so unhappy and I was trying to think of what I was thankful for. And my husband is specifically because the way he was acting was not who I thought I had married. And so I thought, well, I need to make a list of all the good things in him. And I came up with a long list. I mean, he is a hard worker and he could make me laugh and he's a wonderful planner. We took great vacations. He could fix things around the house. I mean, there were a lot of really good things. But what happens when we focus only on those good things is first of all, we're not acknowledging the truth of the not so good things that are causing us harm in our own heart, in our own mind, and in our life. And we are enabling that bad behavior because we're not focusing on, we're not calling out what needs to be called out. So when he's being really grumpy and angry and impatient right after we leave church, and he's been up on the stage on worship team, and then he's just grumpy and the day's already all spent. And then what message is that sending to the kids? It's a hypocrisy and this impatience and the selfishness that the day wasn't turning out the way he wanted. But I tell the kids, oh, Daddy's just hungry. He's had a long morning. He's tired. But it's so when we only focus on the good, where we are denying, we're living in denial.
Right. Very much so. And it becomes a very black and white way of thinking, which is, and what I mean by that is I can only focus on all good and not acknowledge the bad, instead of being able to recognize that people are a combination. Right. Everybody has some good traits and everybody has some bad traits.
Right. And that's what makes it very confusing for a victim of covert narcissistic abuse, because we can look at all that good and then we go, well, what's wrong with me? The bad isn't that bad.
Right.
And so we and I remember what my therapist and I had to work through this quite extensively to get me to a place of accepting that there is good with the bad
and bad.
Have them both, and you have to be okay with that. But when you're in a fog, and when you're in that, experiencing that fear of not respecting or not loving or not thinking highly enough of your spouse, then you just get so trapped up in that fear you can't think clearly.
And that's very true. And add to that, so that's what's going on our end. Add to it on their end that a narcissistic person is there's the black and white thinking is a thing for them. They also cannot hold somebody being good and bad as a combination. Like you're either all good or you're all bad. What I mean by that is if I do then try to speak up a little bit, if I do go, hey, it really hurts me when you talk that way or when you say things like that, like it really hurts me. And I'm trying to point that out. Of course, being the empathetic and tap dancing person that I was, it was, bookended with, hey, I think you're amazing. I think you're great and wonderful. And I'm so glad you did all of these wonderful things. But this
Yes.
one little tiny piece bothered me just a little. But I really, and I would squish it in there, just trying to get some acknowledgement and speak a little bit of the pain that was in my heart. But from his perspective, he would zone in on that one little piece then and so you think I'm a bad person? You think I'm horrible? I'm insecure. And he would then, the whole victim role would come out, and then my whole system would scream, all right, here comes the deep dive, all hands on deck. We got to stop. We're going in a bad direction. And this is going to become that 2-hour circular conversation. So the alarm bells start blaring, and I quickly go right back to praising and all the good things and the wonderful things. And I'm sorry I even brought it up. What's wrong with me that I shouldn't even be thinking about it. It's such a small thing, because they cannot accept that there's good and bad both within themselves or within you.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're kind of getting it from both sides. You're getting it from the church background, and you're getting it from them.
Yeah. And so what that does is that sends us into this place of feeling obligated to make everything right.
Mm-hmm.
So he's upset. I can't control him, but I can control me. So I'm obligated to do everything I can to fix the situation. If he's angry, or if he's upset, or whatever has happened, it's my place to fix it, because he's not going to. In the early years, I thought maybe he could. That's why I hung on for so many years. I hung on for 40 years because I kept hoping that he could change and that he would see his responsibility. But what happens, and this will be another podcast, I'm sure, but he would do the things that he thought he was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would go to the Christian men's conferences, and he would do the prayers. And I always felt so uneasy, like something wasn't quite right. But it was my obligation as a dutiful Christian wife to submit. Mm-hmm. And to not think badly of him, as you said before. And I was obligated to fill that role as a submissive wife. Right. And so that really is, that obligation is just, that's a huge thing in and of itself.
It really is. And I'm going to add to what you just said about the hope that he could change, that you had hope that he could change. I had complete belief that he could change. Like it was beyond the point of hope. I was convinced that, he'll see what he's doing, and he'll learn, and he'll grow. And I just have to put it in the right words. As long as I could find the right words to help him to understand, that was my obligation then, because I could see where his relationship with, let's say, for example, his boys, where the relationship was breaking down. I could see it. So mm-hmm. I was obligated to express that to him, to help him to find the right words so that he could see it. And I believed firmly that once I got to where he could see it, once he got to where he could see it, that he would change, that he would, oh, I get that. And maybe even take it further then and apply it more to himself of, okay, I can see how they would see that. And I hunted for those magic right words for years, for decades, because I felt like it was my obligation. It was my duty to help him because he couldn't help himself, or wouldn't, whatever it was.
Right. Yes, exactly. And we're obligated to help them, to encourage, okay, we want family devotions, and we are obligated as a Christian wife to make that happen, but make it look like daddy is the one who is instigating that.
That is true. He's
the spiritual head of the family. And so we're doing those things behind the scenes, but I wonder today what my kids would say of, oh, you mean dad didn't do that? That was you? It's because right. I feel obligated to make sure that those things happened within the home. And if we didn't do those things, if we didn't follow then through, then the guilt of, oh my gosh, I'm not being a respectful wife. I'm like that lady in Proverbs who tears down her house with her own hands, with her own words. Because I'm not being a good enough wife and mother to be able to make this happen. And the other guilt that comes along with that is the guilt of not going back to the fear and the obligation, the guilt of not wanting to do those things, but feeling like I have to. That's the obligation. I mean, it's all so twisted.
It's also twisted up. I'm going to give you a perfect example of all of this. Like what you're talking about, I believed that we needed to do a nightly Bible time with our children. They were little. We were going to sit down and read scripture. We had a little kids devotional book. And I wanted to make sure that this happened, and our kids were in elementary ages. And I would also make sure that he joined us for this. I'd go and go, hey, it's time to do this, and like you're saying, not only do I set the stage and make sure it happens, I have to make sure it looks like his idea or his doing or his, so I would make sure, you read this part and make sure that he would get it started and all. And so I was doing all of the work, but then while we were there, I also was working overtime to keep things peaceful, to keep things, focused on a child's level, like so that we're not going into these in-depth, great, long biblical narratives that are over the kids' heads because we're going to lose them because I wanted it to be a positive time. So I've got all this going on, okay? And for several years, but over time, these times together as a family started to become really negative. He would, be looking at the kids and going, hey, you need to quit twitching, quit moving with that, quit. And he's starting to kind of nitpick them and pick at them. And if they expressed something he didn't like, then it became this long drawn circular conversation with our children during Bible time.
During Bible time.
So Bible time became so painful that I quit doing it.
Yeah.
I quit doing it. I quit, I'd just be like, hey, we're not going to do it tonight because they're really tired and it's kind of late. So we'll just skip tonight. And I just started making these excuses and pushing it under the rug and kind of let it fade off in the distance. You talk about guilt. I'm so guilty. I'm supposed to be doing these. I'm supposed to be making them happen. I'm supposed to be, making sure that he can have that positive Bible time with his kids. What's his role in this? He should be making sure he has that positive Bible time with his family, and so I let it kind of start to slide. And then, heaven forbid, I did the worst thing was I started having Bible time back with the kids without him. And this started to just it kind of just started naturally happening because the kids would start having conversation with me. And I'd be like, oh, hey, that's like when we read in your book. And I pulled it back out and we read it. And we'd have like this 10-minute little Bible time without Dad. And it was peaceful. It was enjoyable. It was a great way to end the day. Well, then he found out, and how dare you do that without me? And then it became this big, you're leaving me out, and I need to be included in that because I'm their dad. And so all of the guilt and obligation, all of that got intertwined in this situation.
Yeah. And then doesn't it circle back to the fear of, oh my gosh, we're not raising our kids right.
Yes.
Oh, there's, what now? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It all fits back together. And that guilt is so strong and so out of proportion that even when we decide this is not how it's supposed to be anymore and I'm leaving, then we deal with guilt that we're leaving.
Yes.
And that's
a whole nother layer of how can I? Like divorce was not an option. That was not in my vocabulary. This was never, ever, ever going to happen. And by the time I had fought so hard, doing all the right things, trying to make it work, trying to fix it, all the things, that by the time I got to the point that my dad looked at me and said, you can't live like this.
Yeah.
I just collapsed. I mean, it just finally opened the door that you mean I can explore getting out? Like that's
Right.
okay. But I couldn't give myself that permission.
Right.
This came, from generations of church background where divorce didn't happen. I've got families and cousins and all of this who divorce is not a thing. And yet here I stood.
Right. And same with me. One of my brothers finally said, you need to find an attorney and you need to find a therapist for yourself because he's not ever going to change. And this is not okay.
Wow.
This is okay.
Yeah.
My heart goes out, Renee, to the people who don't have that kind of support.
I was just thinking the same thing. Yeah. Yeah. There's so many people who don't have the support of a parent or a sibling or a grandparent, an aunt and uncle, any family support, let alone friend support. All of our friends were church friends, and that's a whole nother podcast episode is then what about the church friends and what develops out of that? Because it's a church family. When you're involved in a church, it's a family. And so the people who are out there who don't have any support, that even one person, all you need is that one person. For me, it was my dad that gave me permission to think outside of that obligation as a Christian wife. So for everyone out there listening that doesn't have the support, like what we're talking about, that don't have permission to voice this, okay, I want to give words of hope to you out there listening that it is okay to voice your feelings. It is okay to listen to them. If you can't voice them to anyone in your life right now, voice them to yourself. Okay. Voice them to God because he is listening. Okay. And voice them so that then you can figure out what to do. You've got to give yourself that permission because otherwise you're living in denial of your own feelings, your own heart, your own instincts. And that living in denial is a hostage situation that God would never support. Okay. He would not want any of us living in a destructive relationship, a destructive marriage. You do matter in life. Your feelings do matter. And I want to just encourage people to find that safety of being able to voice these. Do you have words of hope for those out there listening?
I do, Renee. I never, ever thought that I would be able to be this happy because I was operating in that fog. Mm-hmm. That fear, obligation, and guilt kept me trapped. But I'm so, it's not been easy. No. But it's so much better now. I've been divorced now for a little over a year. Okay. And I'm still healing, but I'm out of the fog.
Yeah. Healing is a lifetime. It's a journey of a lifetime, but it's an amazing journey. And being out of that fog, finding who I am, being the mom I've always wanted to be, being the member of society and the Christian person I want to be. I can show up now being me. And I'm really grateful for that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Kathy, thank you so much for joining us on this. I look forward to more episodes to come. I think we have a great story and passion here to be able to share this with the audience that's out there listening. So thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
All right, everyone out there listening, I wish you so much peace on your journey of healing. You have been listening to the Covert Narcissism podcast. If you are struggling with covert narcissism in your life, I help people to heal from covert narcissistic abuse. If you are struggling with the isolation, the self-doubt, and the obsessive thinking, then this is the program for you. I offer both group and individual options. This is live, personalized coaching that is specific to covert narcissism. Reach out to me anytime. You can find me at my website, covertnarcissism.com. I'm not a therapist and you are not a victim. I am a coach and you are a survivor. I wish you so much peace on your journey of healing. The information provided by Renee Swanson and the Covert Narcissism podcast is for educational purposes only and is not to be used for diagnosis purposes and not intended to be a substitute for clinical care. Please consult a healthcare provider for guidance specific to your case. This material discusses narcissism in general. It does not claim that any specific person has narcissism and should not be used to refer to any specific person as having narcissism. Permission is not granted to link to or repost this material to support an allegation or a claim that any specific person is a narcissist. That would be an unauthorized misuse of the material and information provided.